9-year-old Michael Jackson is sitting in the back seat of his father's Buick when the song comes on the radio. He freezes. His hand stops mid-air, holding a half-eaten sandwich. The voice coming through the speakers is powerful, professional, adult, and according to the DJ, it belongs to him. But Michael doesn't recognize it. He doesn't recognize his own voice. And what he does next makes his mother pull the car over and cry. January 18th, 1968. Gary, Indiana. A Wednesday afternoon. The Jackson family is driving home from school pickup. Joe Jackson is at the wheel. Catherine sits in the passenger seat. Michael, Jermaine, and Marlon are squeezed into the back. The radio is playing. WGRY, the biggest station in Northwest Indiana. The same station that had judged Michael at the talent show 3 years earlier. But that wasn't even the shocking part. The real story had started 2 months ago, and nobody in that car was prepared for what was about to happen. Let me tell you. November 1967. Gordon Keith at Steeltown Records had just pressed 500 copies of Big Boy, the Jackson 5's first official single, the record that Joe Jackson had invested everything in. "How do we get this on the radio?" Joe had asked Gordon. "We send it to every station within 100 miles and pray," Gordon said. "But I'll be honest with you, Joe. Getting airplay for an unknown group from Gary, that's nearly impossible." Joe had taken 50 copies himself. He visited radio stations personally, WGRY, WJOB, WWCA, every program director in the region. "My boys recorded this," Joe would say, holding up the record. "Just give it one listen." Most stations were polite but firm. "We have a rotation schedule, Mr. Jackson. We can't just add unknown artists." Marcus Webb at WGRY had been one of the judges at the talent show where Michael first performed. He remembered the 5-year-old who sang "Climb Every Mountain." "Joe," Marcus had said when Joe showed up at the station, "I remember your boys. That little one, Michael, he had something special." "So you'll play it?" Marcus hesitated. "I'll listen to it, but I can't promise anything." 3 days passed, no response. A week, nothing. 2 weeks later, Joe called the station. "Did you listen to the record?" "I did," Marcus said carefully. "It's good, Joe, really good. But we can't add it to rotation right now. We're locked into a format." Joe hung up, defeated. "They're not going to play it," Joe told Catherine that night. "We spent all that money on recording and pressing, and nobody's going to hear it." Michael, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, heard everything. That's when something unexpected happened. Marcus Webb went home that night and couldn't stop thinking about the record. He played it again and again. The voice on that recording, 8-year-old Michael Jackson, sounded impossible. The next morning, Marcus did something he'd never done before. He went into the station and told the program director, "I'm burning one of my picks for the week. We're adding this record." Every DJ at WGRY got 3 picks per week, songs they could add to rotation based purely on instinct. "You're using your pick on a local kid group?" the program director asked. "Yes, trust me on this one." The Jackson family didn't know any of this was happening. January 18th, 1968. Michael's 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Patricia Bennett, had let school out at 3:15 p.m. Michael walked to the pickup spot where Catherine was waiting in the Buick. Jermaine and Marlon were already in the car. "How was school, baby?" Catherine asked. "Good, Mama." Joe had taken a half day from the steel mill. He'd been working double shifts to pay off the recording debt. Now he slid into the driver's seat, exhausted. "Everyone buckled?" Joe asked. They drove. The radio played, the usual rotation, Motown hits, James Brown, The Temptations. Michael wasn't paying attention. He was thinking about homework, about the spelling test tomorrow, about whether they'd have rehearsal tonight. Then it happened. "Coming up next," the DJ's voice announced. "We've got a new record from right here in Gary, Indiana. This is Big Boy by the Jackson 5. The car went silent. Joe's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Catherine gasped. "Joe, did he just say, shh?" The opening notes of Big Boy filled the car, the drums, the bass, and then Michael's voice. But here's the thing. Michael didn't realize it was him. He heard a voice singing. A strong, confident voice. The kind of voice that belonged to adult R&B singers he heard on the radio all the time. "Who is that?" Michael asked from the back seat. Jermaine looked at him like he was crazy. Are you serious? That's you, Michael, Marlon said. Michael's face went blank. He listened, really listened. The voice kept singing, every note, every word. He'd sung this song dozens of times, but this didn't sound like him. This sounded like someone else, someone better, someone professional, someone Michael didn't recognize. Joe pulled the car over to the side of the road. He needed to hear this, all of it. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. This was the moment he'd been working toward for years. Every double shift at the mill, every rehearsal he'd pushed them through, every door he'd knocked on, it was all leading to this. His son's voices on the radio, professional, real, legitimate. The song played through the car speakers. Michael sat frozen in the back seat, his sandwich forgotten, his eyes wide. When the song ended, the DJ came back on. That was Big Boy by the Jackson 5. Keep your eye on these kids. That lead singer is only 9 years old, and he sounds like he's been singing for 30 years. Joe turned around in his seat. Michael, did you hear that? They're playing our record, on WGRI. But Michael wasn't celebrating. He was staring at the radio with a look his family had never seen before. Confusion, disbelief, something close to fear. Michael? Catherine turned around. Baby, what's wrong? That wasn't me, Michael whispered. What do you mean? Of course it was you. That didn't sound like me, Mama. That sounded like someone else. Catherine reached back and took Michael's hand. Baby, that's what you sound like. That's your voice. Your real voice. But I don't sound like that. I can't sound like that. Jermaine put his arm around Michael. Man, you do sound like that. We hear it every day at rehearsal. You just never heard yourself on a recording before. Michael started crying. Not happy tears, not excited tears, confused, overwhelmed tears. I didn't know, Michael said, his voice shaking. I didn't know I sounded like that. Catherine unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed into the back seat. She pulled Michael close. Why are you crying, baby? Because that person on the radio sounds so grown up, so professional. And I'm just me. I'm just Michael. How can that be me? And that's when Catherine understood. Michael had never connected the voice in his head, the voice he heard when he sang, with what came out. In his mind, he was a 9-year-old kid singing in his garage, but on that recording, he heard what everyone else heard: genius, talent, something that shouldn't be possible, and it terrified him. Joe started the car again and drove home in silence. When they pulled into the driveway at 2300 Jackson Street, the phone was already ringing. Gordon Keith. Joe, did you hear it? WGRY played the record. Marcus Webb just called me. He said the phone's lit up. People calling asking who the Jackson 5 are, where they can buy the record. Yeah, Joe said quietly. We heard it. Well, what did the boys think? Joe looked at Michael, who was still wiping tears from his face. They're processing it. That night, Marcus Webb played Big Boy 2 more times. The first time, at 7:15 p.m. during drive time, the station switchboard lit up within seconds. The second time, at 9:30 p.m., Marcus sat in the booth and just listened. He'd been doing this job for 18 years. He knew what a hit sounded like. This was more than a hit. This was lightning in a bottle. The station received 47 phone calls. Hardware stores in Gary sold out of the record in 3 days. But something had changed in Michael that afternoon in the car. Something fundamental. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He lay in the bed he shared with Jermaine and Marlon, staring at the ceiling. He kept replaying the voice in his head. The voice from the radio. That confident, powerful voice. He whispered the lyrics to himself, trying to match what he'd heard. But it didn't sound the same. In his room, he just sounded like a kid. On the radio, he'd sounded like someone important. Someone who mattered. The gap between those two versions of himself felt impossibly wide. Years later, Michael's sound engineer Bruce Sweetian talked about Michael's relationship with his own recorded voice. Michael never liked listening to playback, Bruce said in a 1995 interview. Most artists love it. They want to hear themselves immediately. Michael would leave the studio during playback. He'd say, "You listen to it and tell me if it's right." Why do you think that was? The interviewer asked. I think Michael never fully trusted that the voice on the recording was really his. He told me once, "When I hear it played back, it sounds like someone else, someone better than me." I'd say, "Michael, that is you. and he'd just shake his head. Katherine Jackson talked about that day in a 2001 interview. Michael came to me that night before bed, Katherine said. He asked me, "Mama, if that's really my voice, does that mean I have to live up to it now? Does that mean I have to sound like that every time?" I told him, "Baby, you don't have to live up to anything. That voice is already yours." But he looked at me with these big, worried eyes and said, "But what if I can't do it again? What if that was just luck?" I held him and said, "Michael, that wasn't luck. That was you. That will always be you." But Michael didn't see it that way. From that day forward, Michael approached performing differently. He wasn't just singing anymore. He was chasing the voice he'd heard on the radio. The voice that seemed impossible. The voice that belonged to someone better than the kid he saw in the mirror. His brothers noticed the change. After he heard himself on the radio, Jermaine said years later, Michael became obsessed with being perfect. Before, he was just naturally good. After, he practiced like his life depended on it, like he was trying to match some impossible standard. What Michael didn't understand was that the standard was him. He was chasing himself. January 1969, 1 year after hearing Big Boy on the radio. The Jackson 5 auditioned for Motown. They were signed immediately. Michael was 10 years old. Berry Gordy, Motown's founder, pulled Joe aside after the audition. "That boy doesn't sound real. Are you sure he's 10? He sounds like he's 25. Joe smiled. He still doesn't believe it himself. Throughout Michael's career, the pattern continued. He would record a vocal. Engineers would play it back. Michael would listen and say, "That's not good enough. I can do better." Quincy Jones, who produced Michael's biggest albums, talked about this in his memoir. Michael would nail a vocal on the first take, Quincy wrote. Absolutely perfect. We'd play it back, and Michael would say, "Let's do it again." I'd ask why. He'd say, "Because that doesn't sound like what I heard in my head." I'd tell him, "Michael, what you heard in your head is what just came out of your mouth." But he never believed it. The voice in Michael's head never matched the voice on the recording. He spent 40 years trying to close that gap. But here's the incredible part. That gap, that disconnect, that refusal to believe he was as good as he actually was, is what made Michael Jackson a perfectionist. It's what made him rehearse until he collapsed. It's what made him record 100 takes when most artists would do 10. Michael Jackson became the greatest entertainer in the world because he never believed he was good enough. And it all started on January 18, 1968, in the back seat of a Buick, when a 9-year-old boy heard his voice on the radio and didn't recognize himself. Today, the radio station WGRY no longer exists, but the building that housed it has a plaque. It reads, "On January 18, 1968, WGRY became the first radio station to play a Michael Jackson record. Big Boy by the Jackson 5 aired at 3:47 p.m. The singer was 9 years old and didn't believe it was really him. In the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, there's an exhibit about Michael Jackson's early years. One of the displays shows the original 45 RPM vinyl of Big Boy. Next to it is a quote from Michael from a 1993 interview. "The first time I heard myself on the radio, I cried. People thought I was crying because I was happy. I wasn't. I was crying because I realized I would never sound as good as that person on the radio. It took me 30 years to understand that person was me." The disconnect between who Michael Jackson was and who Michael Jackson thought he was defined his entire career. He chased perfection because he never believed he'd already achieved it. Every record he broke, every award he won, every sold-out stadium, Michael was still chasing the voice he heard on the radio that January afternoon. The voice that sounded impossible, the voice he didn't believe could be his. Sometimes the greatest artists are the ones who never realize their own greatness. They just keep reaching for something they think is out there, not understanding it's been inside them all along. If this story of Michael Jackson's complicated relationship with his own talent moved you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that sometimes we are already what we're trying to become. Have you ever not recognized your own abilities? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to turn on notifications because more incredible true stories about the making of a legend are coming.